In part 1 I looked at my Kriesler Beehive radio, but when I tested it didn't work. It had a faulty valve in it. So I went on to explain why I thought the valve had failed. Now with the radio working and a clean and a restring, the chassis is finished. Today I'm going to look at the badly scratched case. Well, here's the case if you recall, and shaped like a beehive. Now these louvers are in individual pieces, so each one of these is a piece and it's got a bolt through and it's held together. So if I undo the nuts here, this all comes apart. I've also got to try and save this Kriesler badge. It's made of plastic. I think it's going to fall to pieces. I'm not sure what to do there. It's just plastic and they've just melted it back on the back there, so I'm thinking I'll shave that off and try and push it out. I don't know how this is going to go. It's missing a bit of the I there, and I think it's missing a bit of the K. That may be how it was, I don't know. I'll see if I can just cut those ends off. Yeah, that's the K, that one. Oh, I'm just going to try pushing them out with a centre punch so I can get a bit of depth in there. Something gave. It's come away. Now I'll try it with a nail. I think it's coming out. There it goes. There you go. There it is. It came out in one piece, which is good. I'll glue the K back on and perhaps paint it red. The Kriesler signs were usually red, so I guess that's what it should be. So I'll see how we go with that one. Alright, I'm going to start taking these louvers out, so I'll undo all the nuts and come back when the louvers are ready to come out. Alright, they've all come off. It was easy to take the shafts out. This one didn't want to come out, but there it is. So that's it. There's just a stack of those. Well, at least they'll be easy to clean. At least they'll be easy to paint strip. So the next part of this is going to be to paint strip the rest of this off. This has got some scratches on it. I'm going to have to try and buff them out, or perhaps run a bit of wet and dry over them first. But anyway, cross that bridge when we get there. Alright, well, I guess I'll just cover them with the paint stripper and clean them up. I've put the paint stripper on everything, inside and out, to get all the overspray as well if I can. I'll leave that for an hour or so and come back. I've cleaned all the paint off. It's hard to get off this stuff. I don't know what they use, but it doesn't want to come off. Now there's some scratches in this Bakelite. I'm going to have to try and get that out before I polish it. I don't know if that's from trying to remove the paint from the previous people. It's got lots of little scratches. So what I'm going to do is run over it with about 1,000 grit wet and dry. So I'll do that in the trough and just try and clean them up. They're not that deep, but you can feel them. I've got to be careful with the wet and dry, because if I go right through the skin, it'll reveal the inside of the Bakelite, which is a porous kind of material. It's still Bakelite, but it won't buff up. So I don't want to go through. I just need to just try and diminish these scratches as much as I can. So it's too late now. I'm going to do it all in the morning. I've got another little job to do in the morning before I start trying to buff these up. Well, good morning. Today I thought I'd have a go at redoing this stylized Kriesler sign. And I mulled over quite a few ideas. What I ended up with, and this is my wife's idea, was to use Play-Doh. So I'm going to impress this on the sign, pull it off, and then put something in there to make a new sign up. So I'll see how it works. I've put a board on the back to keep it flat so that when I peel it off it doesn't bend. So at least I've got a reference to what it should be shaped like. I've got the base of the radio upside down because it's a bit more stable. And I'm just going to line that up again. I think that's about right where the K is, because that spins around, and hopefully now Play-Doh has some oil in it, so it shouldn't stick. I'm hoping might stick to the sign, but it shouldn't. Okay, there goes that plan. So I'll just try and get it off now. That's okay. Now I should be able to just pick these out. That looks amazingly good. We're missing the top arm of this K, and I've sharpened an icy pole stick, which is an ice block stick. I don't know what, pop stick or something perhaps in America. I'm wondering if I can just put my own K in there. Now the good thing about this is if it doesn't come out, I'll just do it again. Ooh. So let's push that over. Okay, that looks a mess. I'm going to try all that again, so I'll just squash back the Play-Doh and do it all again, and we'll try again. Well, here's attempt number 2. What I've done is got a bit of icy pole stick, and as I said, I think they're called popsicle sticks in America, and just shaped it to make the K. So I've super glued that on there. That'll just come off with some solvent. I've stuck a toothpick here, and I've also super glued that in to represent the dot on the eye. So we'll see how that goes. My original intention was to just put something through there and paint it. So if the eye falls off, it doesn't really matter, or the dot. So I'll try again. And hopefully the icy pole sticks will stay there. Yeah. Okay. That doesn't look too bad, does it? That bit there's come out okay. I'll have to just nibble away there to make it strong. Otherwise it's not going to have enough material there to join it. The eye, I need to cut a little bit out there. Not as deep, just take that little bit square there, and that'll hold the eye in, I hope. And you can see they've done it there. It's got just a slight relief in there just to hold on to the eye. That looks pretty good. Alright, I'll just fix those little bits and come back and we'll do step 2. I've fixed up that K area and I've made a little connection between the dot on the eye there, so let's hope it stays together. What I'm going to use is some fiberglass clear casting resin, so this stuff dries crystal clear. So I don't think this is going to work because I think the resin's going to go everywhere. I've been playing with this for a few minutes, just getting rid of the excess resin. I'm going to have to cut around these letters now. It's obviously going to end up with a big film on the back here. So kind of hoping to avoid that. I probably really knew I was never going to. But hopefully it's thin enough it'll just break away pretty much. Now this resin takes about 24 hours to dry, so I'm going to leave it here and I'll go and work on the case, get that buffed up and try and get some of the scratches out of it. I'm going to start with some 800 paper, see how we go with that, and then move on to 1200. That seems to actually remove them. I didn't think it would do it so easily. Okay, well I better move on. I'll just feather it off with the 1200 and I think that'll be okay. Well, I've got to say that's pretty impressive. So I'm going to buff that with some, probably use a bit of car polish just to take get some gloss back, and then I'll buff it up and see how it comes up. I've just got a very mild automotive cut and polish. I'm going to try and see if I can bring the luster back on this. Whatever happens, I'll use Brasso in the end to bring it up. That seems to be the best of all. So that's come up pretty good. The scratches are still there, but they're almost gone. I've got a polish that I put on, and that just about hides the rest of it. But that's not too bad. The main scratches were here, so they're pretty much gone. So perhaps I could work on that end a bit more, try and get rid of those a bit more. I just don't want to go through that hard case on it. there it is. That's the just the first step, and it's come up pretty good. So that's the rest of it's going to come out good. So very happy with that. There's a couple of little scratches I missed. Once you get the water on it, you can't see them. There's a little scratch there. I'll just get rid of that, and perhaps that little mark there, and that's it. That's come up really well. So once I brasso, it'll come up good again, and I've put this wax on it, which I'll show you shortly, and that brings it out even nice, deep, rich, and it fills up the little minute scratches to the left. So I'm very happy with that. I'm going to keep going and do the rest of it. Look, I've just come back again. I fixed up the other little scratches again and polished it a bit more, and gee, it looks good. It's come up really well. I haven't done the brasso yet, and I haven't put the wax on yet. I was a bit worried about this because the case had been treated badly and has lots of little scratches in it, but you can barely see any of them there. I'm just going to recap what I've done. I used some 1200 waterproof paper, or wet and dry as we call it, and I used some 2000 wet and dry or waterproof paper, and I got to say the 1200 is plenty. You don't need to go any coarser than that, and even the 2000 will take out the minor stuff. If you keep rubbing it long enough, it'll take it off. So this Bakelite comes off fairly easy. Now after I cut it back, I polished it with this cut and polish. This is a very mild one. It's a cream. It's not a machine-on one. It's not something you'd use after you'd paint it. It's more when you want to do your car on a Sunday afternoon. So it's quite a light polish, but that brought it back very nice. I used a bit of brasso to finish off, and that just brings it back. This just gives it that slight gloss. It's hard to pick, but and you probably, if you didn't want to, you probably leave it off. This is the wax I sometimes put on the top of damaged Bakelite if it's faded. This is terrific. It really brings it back. It's Carnauba wax. It's brown tinted, this one. So it's ideal. I think you can get in clear as well. So I'm just going to try doing that. So just for a bit of interest, I've put some tape down one side. I'll just do this area here and just see if we can tell the difference, or I can tell the difference anyway. This is as much for my benefit as anybody's. So the idea is you just put it on, wear gloves. Look at the brown on this comes out. And you just apply it and rub it in, and just get a bit of heat going in it to melt it into the pores of the Bakelite. And you leave that for about 15 minutes, and then we polish it off. Oh, it's been 15 minutes. I'll just give it a bit of a buff. All right, I'll take the tape off and have a look. Unfortunately, where the masking tape is, it's taken some of the gloss off the old bit. I think you can see that side there is a much deeper gloss on it, and just ignore that bit where the masking tape is. But comparing it to this side here, it's just slightly glossy. In fact, to me it looks pretty good. So it definitely improves it and gives it a nice deep brown colour. It's quite good. I'm going to continue with the rest of it. I'm going to put wax on the rest of it and the louvers. Just going to go back and check my Kriesler badge that I was making and see how that's come out. This has been over 24 hours now, and this has been a failure. This resin has not gone off. What I had in the cup's gone off, and it's quite solid. This is still soft, and I think it's actually soaked into the Play-Doh because we've now got depressions where the lettering is. This hasn't worked. Scrapping this idea, we're going to Plan C. Now, Plan C involves me making a silicon mold, so I'm going to do that. Most of the recipes on the internet are exactly the same, but basically it's silicon and some cornstarch or corn flour, depending where you're from. I believe you put in about half the amount of flour to silicon. I have no idea how much that's going to be. And it says a couple of drops of baby oil. That's a couple. Also added a bit of acrylic paint. I think this is just to give it a bit of colour more than anything. I don't think it does anything. Whoop, there you go. Okay. That comes out fast. So then the plan is you mix it together. Maybe I got too much flour. And it should form a silicon dough ball. Definitely got too much flour there. I'll put some more silicon in. Now I'll leave a link in the description on how to do this. I'm going to go in with my hands. So I'm going to follow the same procedure I did before. We've got it on the board, and I'm going to just place it over the script that's on the front of the radio. Alright, I'm going to give it a go. This, I don't think, not sure this is going to work. It's a very lumpy sort of mixture. I'm pushing it on pretty hard, and I'm going to have to leave it there for around about half an hour or so for that to dry off. This has gone quite rubbery, so I'll see what happens. Let's hope something comes out. It's coming off easily enough. It looks good. Let's try this again. Well, I'm going to stretch away a bit from the sign so that I think that's going to come out pretty good actually. Yeah, easy. Alright, wow, that looks pretty good. It's got a small defect there. Apart from that, it's not too bad. So I'll remove that bit there to give it some strength for the K, and relieve that little bit there so that it supports the dot on the eye. I reckon we're in good place. Yeah, that looks good. I think that's worked better than the Play-Doh. The other thing is, once this does go right off, I can reuse it. I mixed up some more of this casting resin. Well, I'm going to try that again. So just try not to get it everywhere this time. Started off alright and got a bit carried away at the end. Just had a couple of little bubbles in there. I managed to get them out, so I think I'll leave it at that. We'll see how this comes out. I'm not terribly hopeful, but I think it's going to be too fragile. This is one I did in the casting fiberglass resin, and it hasn't dried. There's the mixing cup I used, and it's as hard as a rock. But here, it still stretches, and if you put your finger on it, it leaves fingerprints. So I don't know what's going on. Clearly that's a failure. So after a seemingly endless parade of failures, I've ordered a different casting material. It's a 2-part mix and it dries in about 10 minutes. These things are taking 24 hours to dry, and it takes me 24 hours to work out that it's failed, so I'm just losing too much time. So the stuff I've got is dedicated to doing this sort of thing, so I'll see how we go with that. If that fails, I'll do something else completely. So I'm going to try plasticine again. That seemed to work pretty good originally, so I've made a good mould, and it's instant. I've just sprayed a bit of cooking oil on that surface there so it won't stick. Alright, let's see how we go. There you go. So that makes a pretty good mould. That's what I'm going to use. It's called smooth cast. You mix it part A and B together, and I believe you've got 10 minutes. It'll go hard, so that'll be great. Well, I've mixed that very thoroughly, and it's gone crystal clear. So I can't see any streaks of the two parts in there, so hopefully that's okay. Should just go in here nicely. It's running everywhere. So I'm going to smooth that out and just try and get the excess off. I don't want it that thick. Alright, I'll come back in 10 minutes. Well, there it is. It's come out alright. It's actually bubbled up slightly. It's raised as though it's grown a bit as it's set. So that's a bit of an issue for me. So what I'm thinking is maybe leave it in the plasticine for a minute, and I'll perhaps try and sand it flat or something. Now that's what I mixed up in the cup. That was what was left over, and I can't break that. I can just bend it if I push hard enough. So if I can clean that up, I reckon it'll come up all right. This is the base of the radio. I've just swung it around so that I'm on the opposite side to where this writing goes, and I've got a bit of wet and dry here I've taped on with masking tape. And I've just started rubbing it just to see if it'll work. And it's taking something white off, so I guess it's getting on the lettering. I think I'm getting somewhere with it. I think it's flattening it off, so I'll keep going. Alright, that's about as far as I can go. The Play-Doh's falling apart around it. So I'm going to take it out and we'll see what it looks like. I think with Play-Doh it melts under hot water, so failing everything I can just rinse it under hot water. So I've just cleaned the Play-Doh off with hot water and a toothbrush, and that's come out pretty good. I need to go around and clean up all the little webbing in there, the dags around the edge. There's a bit of damage where the K's joined. I'll just have to smooth that off somehow. And clean up all this stuff here, and I reckon it'll look alright. And as a bit of a bonus, I made a pair out of the leftover Play-Doh. Okay, there's our little sign. I've put it on the board there with a bit of double stick tape and just picked up the edge of the sign there. So I can get it off again later. If I didn't put it tape there, I think I'd blow it away with a spray paint. I'm going to paint it gold out of a rattle can. We'll see how it comes up. So I'll give it time to dry, check it out. If it needs another coat, I'll do that. After the first coat, it looked a bit messy, so I ended up sanding it slightly and spraying it with a high build putty, and then I put another coat of the gold over it. I've lifted it off the piece of timber and put it back on another bit of double-sided tape to make sure the paint didn't build up on the bottom of it, and to glue it to the board and leave a rough edge. So now I'm just going to put a clear coat over it, and that'll be it. I need to finish the base off, and then I can glue this on. Well, there it is. The Kriesler badge is pretty much done. It's come up pretty good. Can't complain about it. A lot of work, ridiculous amount of effort into that, but of course you've got to learn how to do these things. So if I need to do it again, at least I've got the ability, I suppose. But yeah, it looks pretty good. Just got to work out how to glue it on now. I've got all the parts I need finished. They're all polished up. Polished all these, cleaned up the nuts and bolts. The multi-layers of this radio had little gasket type washers between the layers, so I've got some fibre washers to put in there. I'm just going to start the assembly. I'm going to fit these 4 tie bolts back into the top of the radio. I'm just going to lock 2 nuts together so I can screw them in. So now it's just a matter of fitting the washers and then layering on the little louvers. That's it, keep going. So it's just some nuts on the top here, and that holds the whole assembly together. Then there's another set of nuts to go on here that the chassis sits on, and then some nuts to go on top of that. So I hope I've left enough thread there. If I haven't, I'm going to have to wind them out a bit. I'm not going to do these up very tight because this thing's going to expand and contract. I don't want it shattering or something. So just do them up tight enough to hold it. That's it. That's come up pretty good. I'm happy with that. I just got to try and work out how to get that Kriesler decal on, and then I can put the chassis back and we're done. Okay, I'm going to try to glue this on. I've put some tape down to know where to put it. It'll just sort of rest on the tape, and that's the right place for it. I've got some adhesive here that's supposed to be for plastic, but it dries clear. It looks like PVA, but it says plastic on the front, so I'm assuming it's going to work. So I just want to just dip that in that. Now any adhesive that goes out is going to dry clear, so you shouldn't be able to see it. I don't think there'll be a lot. There's a little bit coming out around the K, which is disappointing. I just need to hold this here for a few seconds. That's in exactly the right spot. I'm going to try and just clear that up with a bit of tissue and a very small screwdriver or something, and just get the excess off there. This is the final step. I'm going to put the radio back in the case. I've fitted the nuts here for the chassis to sit on. I'm going to lower it in. I've struck a bit of a snag. The tie bolts that are used to bolt all the louvers together are smaller than the holes in the louvers, so I should have left them loose so that I could move the tie bolts over. So the tie bolts are engaged on one end, and this end they're not lining up properly. So I'm going to loosen all these nuts off, and then they can float around. I can center the radio, and then I'll nip them up again. I've loosened all the nuts off now, and now this can actually move around a little bit. I'll just see how it's fitting down the bottom. It's probably got a little bit more green on that side than that side, and a bit easier to see down the bottom here. It's got hardly any green there. So I'll drop the nuts on one side and perhaps raise them on the other. It's looking a bit better. Can use a tiny bit more, but not much. So I'll just raise this side up a little, and I think we'll call that good enough, because I can't see it being perfect. It's actually not far off being perfect, so alright, I'll leave it there for the time being and just check it once I turn it over. So I'll put all the nuts on top here and lock it up. Okay, I've done all the nuts up, and I've retightened the nuts that hold the louvers together down the bottom. So I'll flip it over and just see what the screen looks like when I can see it properly. That's come up pretty good. The green lines are pretty well perfectly lined up with the Bakelite, so the nice even line across there, so I'm going to leave it that way. All that's left to do is put his lid on. Alright, so flip it over now. I paint stripped the knobs. They've come up okay, gave them a bit of a polish. I had to make some tiny little felts to go behind the knobs. These knobs are very small on the base there, so I've had to make my own little felts to fit them. So I'll just put the felts on first. Just put the knobs on. Okay, I'll tighten them up and we'll give it a go. There it is, all done, and I got to say that is one of the nicest looking finishes on a radio I've seen. This is very close to what it would have looked like in the shop, I would have thought, back in 1946. It's a bit of a wacky design and a bit of a collector's item, so I'm glad to put this in my collection. I've changed the power lead to something that represents 1946, a little better than the 15 amp welding wire it had on it before. This is a lead from Carl's Capacitors. If you want parts for your radio, have a look at Carl, his link's in the description. It's no good having a good looking radio without it working properly, so I'm going to power it up.
Now, so if we started watching a country practice for a couple of episodes, you'd enjoy it, but then would you start to get bored?
First afterbirth by
Jimmy Hands was so water, but
I don't know what you expect him to get to these lofty heights in 23 years.
Do you think people will, Rob, because it was streaming?
Well, it still works, that's good. Well, I reckon that's come up really, really, really nice. I don't think it'll come out on the camera as well as what it looks here. It's just gleaming. It's brilliant. That's it for this radio. It's a 1946 11-4 Kriesler radio made in Newtown in Sydney by the Kriesler Corporation. Spelled with a K, not a C, of course. And I had a bit of fun with this. I spent ages stripping and polishing the case. I also spent ages making a little replica Kriesler sign, which I don't think anyone with any sense would have spent that much time doing that. But anyway, we got there, and that information is useful for future radios, so won't be wasted. I also worked out you can remove some minor scratches from Bakelite without damaging it, and it comes up, you can't see the scratches. A lot of the scratches that were still there when I was polishing it, I went back and sanded them out, so I think I got about 90% of all the scratches out, and the ones that are left are very minor. Well, that's it for this Kriesler radio. I'm calling it a day. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you can come back and join me on the next radio adventure.
The Texas Rangers.
Texas Rangers, first to advance, last to retreat.
Texas, more than 260,000 square miles.
And 50 men who make up the most famous and oldest law enforcement body in North America.